The whistle of the eastbound train sliced through the dry Montana air. As it pulled into Stockton's modest station on a sweltering July afternoon in 1878, Hannah Adams clutched her valise with white knuckles, attempting to steady her breathing as she peered through the soot-stained window at the dusty frontier town that was to be her new home. Her education from Boston's finest women's college felt suddenly worthless as anxiety knotted in her stomach. "Last stop, Stockton," the conductor called, startling Hannah from her reverie. She smoothed down her navy traveling dress, mentally rehearsing the description of her soon-to-be husband. Vincent Yates, 30 years old, cattle rancher, brown hair, tall. The letters they'd exchanged over 6 months had been brief, but promising, until she'd made the mistake of mentioning her education. His reply had been delayed, his enthusiasm noticeably cooled, but he'd still sent the train ticket. That had to mean something, didn't it? The platform was nearly empty save for a few townspeople collecting parcels. Hannah descended from the train, the late afternoon sun immediately heating her face as she scanned the sparse crowd for a tall man with brown hair. No one approached. Minutes stretched uncomfortably as passengers dispersed, leaving her alone with her trunk and diminishing hope. "Miss Adams." Hannah turned to face a wiry boy of about 14, hat clutched respectfully in his hands. "Yes, that's me," she replied, forcing a smile. "Mr. Yates sent me to fetch you. I'm Danny, I work at the livery." He awkwardly gestured toward her trunk. "I've got the wagon just yonder." "Mr. Yates didn't come himself?" Hannah asked, unable to mask her disappointment. Danny shifted uncomfortably. "No, madam. Said he was needed at the ranch." He looked down at his boots. "Let me get your things." The ride to the Yates ranch passed in uncomfortable silence. Hannah tried to appreciate the wild beauty of the Montana landscape, rolling hills dotted with ponderosa pines, distant mountains framed against an impossibly blue sky, but worry gnawed at her insides. Why hadn't Vincent met her himself? Had he changed his mind entirely? After an hour's journey, they arrived at a sprawling ranch house surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. The 2-story wooden structure was handsome in a practical, frontier way, with a wide porch and sturdy construction. Under different circumstances, Hannah might have felt relief at the evident prosperity. Danny helped her down from the wagon. "I'll take your trunk inside, madam." Before Hannah could respond, the front door swung open. A tall man with broad shoulders and sun-browned skin stepped onto the porch. His brown hair was longer than she'd imagined, brushing his collar, and his face was partially obscured by several days' growth of beard. Vincent Yates had the weathered look of a man who spent his days outdoors, his piercing blue eyes immediately finding hers across the yard. Hannah smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress and approached the porch. "Mr. Yates, I'm Hannah Adams," he nodded curtly. "Miss Adams, welcome to Montana." No smile softened his features, no warmth colored his tone. His gaze swept over her briefly before returning to her face. "You must be tired from your journey. Mrs. Coleman has prepared a room for you in the house." "Mrs. Coleman," Hannah echoed, "my housekeeper." He cleared his throat. "We should talk, Miss Adams, but it can wait until you've rested." Hannah's heart sank. This cold reception was worse than she'd feared. "I prefer we talk now, Mr. Yates." A muscle ticked in his jaw as he gestured her inside. The house's interior was surprisingly comfortable, clean, well-furnished, with touches of refinement she hadn't expected. He led her to a sitting room and remained standing while she perched on the edge of a chair. "Miss Adams," he began, his voice low and controlled, "I feel I must be direct. Your last letter mentioned your college education, something you hadn't disclosed previously." "I didn't think it relevant initially," Hannah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Does my education pose a problem? Vincent paced to the window, hands clasped behind his back. This is rough country, Miss Adams. A woman with your background would find little satisfaction here. There are no libraries, no literary societies, no orchestras. My ranch needs a practical woman who understands the hardships of frontier life. You believe education has made me impractical? Hannah asked, indignation flaring. I believe it has given you expectations this life cannot fulfill, he replied bluntly. Boston and Stockton might as well be different planets. Hannah stood, refusing to show the hurt his words inflicted. Mr. Yates, I came here in good faith. I'm not afraid of hard work. My education hasn't made me less capable, quite the opposite. Nevertheless, he continued, I cannot in good conscience bind you to our arrangement. You would be unhappy here. He finally turned to face her. I'll pay for your return ticket to Boston. Hannah felt as though she'd been slapped. After selling most of her possessions, leaving her teaching position and traveling thousands of miles, she was being rejected sight unseen. And where am I to stay until the next train? She asked quietly. Something like guilt flickered across his face. You're welcome to stay here until arrangements can be made. Mrs. Coleman will see to your needs. That's very generous, Hannah said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. But I wonder if I might ask one thing more. Vincent raised an eyebrow. What's that? A chance to prove myself. Give me 1 month. If at the end of it you still wish me to leave, I'll go without protest. He studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. What do you propose to do in this month? Hannah lifted her chin. Whatever work needs doing. I'm a quick learner, Mr. Yates. There's little work suitable for a lady of your standing, he said dismissively. Then perhaps there's something I could teach you, Hannah replied, an idea forming rapidly. You have ledgers for your ranch, correspondence with buyers. In your letters, you mentioned wanting to expand your operations. A flicker of interest crossed his face. What are you suggesting? I could teach you better accounting methods, help with your business correspondence. In return, you teach me about ranch life. At the end of the month, we reassess. Vincent's jaw worked as he considered her proposal. Hannah held her breath, knowing her future hung on his next words. 1 month, he finally said. But don't expect special treatment, Miss Adams. And when the month is done, my decision is final. Agreed, Hannah replied, extending her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Vincent took it. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through Hannah's arm. Mrs. Coleman will show you to your room, he said, releasing her hand and stepping back. Dinner is at 6. As he strode from the room, Hannah sank back into her chair, relief and apprehension battling within her. She had 1 month to convince this stubborn cowboy that an educated woman could thrive on the frontier, and perhaps discover if the man behind those guarded blue eyes was the same one whose letters had once given her hope. The first week at the Yates Ranch proved more challenging than Hannah had anticipated. Her days began before dawn and ended well after sunset, filled with unfamiliar tasks that left her muscles aching and her hands blistered. Mrs. Coleman, a stout widow in her 50s, became her reluctant guide to frontier housekeeping. City girls, the housekeeper muttered on Hannah's second morning, watching her struggle with the heavy cast-iron cookstove. All book learning and no practical sense. Hannah bit back a retort. I'm willing to learn, Mrs. Coleman. Perhaps you could show me rather than criticize. The older woman's eyebrows rose, but something like respect flickered in her eyes. Spirited, aren't you? Very well then, under Mrs. Coleman's exacting tutelage, Hannah learned to manage the temperamental stove, churn butter, preserve vegetables from the kitchen garden, and make soap from lye and tallow, all skills her Boston education had neglected to cover. Vincent remained distant, leaving early each morning to work with his cattle and returning late for supper. Their agreed-upon lessons hadn't materialized, and Hannah began to suspect he was deliberately avoiding her. The few times they did interact, his responses were clipped, his manner formal. On her 7th day at the ranch, Hannah decided enough was enough. She rose even earlier than usual, prepared coffee and a simple breakfast, and was waiting in the kitchen when Vincent came down. He stopped short in the doorway, clearly surprised to see her. "Miss Adams, you're up early." "Mr. Yates," she acknowledged, pouring him a cup of coffee. "I believe we had an agreement. A week has passed and we've yet to begin." He accepted the coffee with a wary nod. "I've been busy with the herd." "I understand," Hannah said, keeping her voice even, "but our arrangement was mutual. I've been learning household management from Mrs. Coleman. When do I begin helping with your accounts?" Vincent studied her over the rim of his cup. "Today, if you're so eager. My office is in the west corner of the house. Come by after breakfast." "I'll be there," Hannah replied, trying not to show her triumph. Vincent's office was surprisingly orderly, with a large oak desk, bookshelves, and a window overlooking the corral. Hannah found him sorting through a stack of papers, his forehead creased in concentration. "These are the cattle sale records from the last 3 months," he said without preamble, gesturing to the papers. "I keep losing track of which buyers have paid and which still owe." Hannah examined his ledger, a simple book with dates, names, and figures jotted down in a cramped, utilitarian hand. "I see the problem. You're not using a proper double-entry system." "A what?" His brow furrowed. "A method to track both debits and credits," Hannah explained, pulling up a chair. "May I?" He nodded, watching as she took up a pencil and began creating a new format on blank paper. Hannah felt his gaze on her hands as she worked, surprisingly conscious of his proximity. "This column shows what's owed to you, this one what's been paid, and this tracks your expenses against profits," she explained. "It's a system used by businesses in the East to keep accounts clear." Vincent leaned closer to see, bringing with him the scent of soap and sun-warmed skin. "That's actually quite sensible." "Harvard Business School thinks so," Hannah replied with a small smile. "Would you like me to transfer your existing records to this format?" He studied her for a moment. "You know how to do that?" "I taught basic accounting to young women in Boston," Hannah said. "Before I decided to answer your advertisement." Something shifted in Vincent's expression, surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. "Go ahead, show me what you can do." For the next 2 hours, Hannah organized his chaotic records, explaining each step of the process. Vincent proved to be a quick study, asking intelligent questions that revealed a sharp mind behind his taciturn exterior. "This shows you're owed over $300 by Harrington's Meat Company in Helena," Hannah pointed out, tapping the newly organized ledger. Vincent frowned. "I thought that account was settled months ago. According to your records, they've paid only half the agreed amount." He sat back, a reluctant admiration in his eyes. "That's helpful information, Miss Adams. I'm glad to be of service," Hannah replied, unable to suppress a note of satisfaction. "Perhaps tomorrow we could draft a polite letter requesting payment." "Perhaps," he agreed, then checked his pocket watch. "I need to get back to the herd. Thank you for this." He gestured at the organized ledger. As he stood to leave, Hannah gathered her courage. "Mr. Yates, I believe our agreement included mutual education. When might I learn more about the ranch itself?" He paused at the door, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "You want to learn about cattle ranching?" "I want to understand the business in its entirety," Hannah replied. "How can I properly organize your accounts if I don't understand where the figures come from?" A hint of a smile, the first she'd seen, tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair point. Sunday afternoon I'll be checking the north pasture. If you can ride, you're welcome to join me." "I'll be ready," Hannah promised, ignoring the fact that she hadn't been on a horse since childhood. When Sunday arrived, Hannah faced her second challenge, convincing Mrs. Coleman to help her find suitable riding attire. "You want to do what?" the housekeeper exclaimed, hands on her ample hips. "Ride out to the north pasture with Mr. Yates," Hannah repeated. "He's agreed to show me the ranch operations." Mrs. Coleman looked skeptical. "In that," she gestured to Hannah's modest day dress. "I was hoping you might have suggestions," Hannah admitted. To her surprise, the older woman's face softened. "Wait here." She returned with a pair of men's trousers, a flannel shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat. "These belonged to my son before he moved to California. They might be close enough to your size." Hannah stared at the trousers in shock. "Mrs. Coleman, I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will, unless you fancy getting your skirts caught in a stirrup and being dragged to your death," the housekeeper said practically. "No one but the ranch hands will see you, and they've seen women in trousers before." Swallowing her misgivings, Hannah changed into the unfamiliar garments. The trousers felt scandalously revealing after years of layers of petticoats, but she had to admit they were practical. When she emerged from her room, Mrs. Coleman nodded approvingly. "There's hope for you yet, Boston," she said, using the nickname she'd bestowed on Hannah. "Now for your next lesson, how not to fall off a horse." Hannah found Vincent at the stables, saddling a handsome chestnut gelding. He turned at her approach, his eyes widening at her appearance before his expression quickly returned to neutral. "Mrs. Coleman's idea," Hannah explained hastily, gesturing to her outfit. "She said it would be safer." "Mrs. Coleman is right," Vincent agreed, his voice carefully even. "I've saddled Penny for you. She's gentle with inexperienced riders." "Is it that obvious I haven't ridden recently?" Hannah asked, approaching the placid-looking mare. A ghost of a smile crossed Vincent's face. "The way you're looking at her like she might bite gives it away." Under his patient instruction, Hannah mounted the mare and adjusted to the unfamiliar sensation of sitting astride. Vincent led them at a gentle pace away from the ranch buildings and toward the rolling hills beyond. As they rode, he began pointing out features of his land where the best grasses grew, how he diverted water from a creek to create a reliable source for his cattle, which areas needed watching for predators. Hannah listened intently, asking questions that gradually drew him out. "How did you come to ranching?" she asked as they paused atop a rise overlooking a valley where black and brown cattle grazed. Vincent was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. "My father moved us west when I was 14, looking for opportunity after the war left Virginia in ruins. He died of pneumonia our first winter here. I worked other men's ranches until I saved enough to buy my own land." "I'm sorry about your father," Hannah said softly. "You've built something impressive here." He glanced at her, as if gauging her sincerity, then nodded. "It's not finished yet. I aim to have the largest breeding operation in the county within 5 years." "An ambitious goal," Hannah observed. "Is that why you advertised for a wife, to help with your expansion plans?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "Partly. A ranch needs a woman's touch to become a home, and," he hesitated, "children to pass it on to." The practical assessment should have offended her, but Hannah found herself appreciating his honesty. "A reasonable consideration for a businessman. And you?" he asked unexpectedly. "Why did a college-educated woman from Boston agree to marry a stranger in Montana territory?" Hannah looked out over the landscape, considering her answer. "My parents died in a fire when I was 18. I put myself through college teaching younger girls, but Boston held nothing for me anymore. The prospect of building something new appealed to me." Vincent studied her profile. "I'm sorry about your parents." "Thank you," she said simply. They rode in companionable silence for a while, eventually reaching a stream where Vincent suggested they rest the horses. He helped Hannah dismount, his hands firm around her waist, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. As they sat on sun-warmed rocks by the water, Vincent pointed to plants and explained their uses, which were poisonous to cattle, which had medicinal properties, which indicated good soil. Hannah found herself fascinated not just by the information but by the transformation in the man himself. In his element, passion animated his features and warmed his voice. "You know a great deal about botany," she observed. He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Just practical knowledge." "Nothing like college learning." "Knowledge is knowledge," Hannah replied, "whether it comes from books or experience." Vincent studied her with renewed interest. "You actually believe that, of course. Why wouldn't I? Most educated folks I've met look down on practical skills," he said, skimming a stone across the water. "They think book learning is the only kind that matters." "Then they're fools," Hannah said firmly. "Different kinds of knowledge serve different purposes. Your understanding of this land would be useless in a Boston drawing room, but my knowledge of literature is equally useless out here." Vincent's lips quirked. "Not entirely useless. Gets mighty quiet during winter blizzards. A good book helps pass the time." Hannah blinked in surprise. "You enjoy reading?" He looked almost embarrassed. "When I can. Don't have much beyond some agricultural journals and a few dog-eared novels." "I brought books with me," Hannah offered. "You're welcome to borrow them." Something warm flickered in his eyes. "I'd like that." The sun was beginning to lower in the sky when Vincent reluctantly suggested they head back. The return journey was punctuated by comfortable conversation, with Vincent pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his early days on the ranch. As they approached the homestead, Hannah felt a curious reluctance for the day to end. Something had shifted between them, a tentative bridge spanning the gulf of their differences. "Thank you for today," she said as they reached the stables. "I've learned a great deal." Vincent dismounted and came to help her down. This time, as his hands encircled her waist, their eyes met and held. For a breathless moment, Hannah thought he might say something more, but he simply nodded and stepped back. "You're a quick study, Miss Adams," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "Perhaps Mrs. Coleman was right about you." "What did she say?" Hannah asked curiously. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "That there might be hope for you yet, Boston." As the days passed, a routine developed that brought Hannah and Vincent into regular contact. Mornings were spent helping Mrs. Coleman with household tasks, afternoons in Vincent's office organizing his accounts and correspondence, and some evenings by the fire where Hannah had begun reading aloud from her copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, which Vincent had never encountered. His initial skepticism about her presence was gradually giving way to something warmer, though Hannah tried not to read too much into the lingering glances or the way his hand occasionally brushed hers when passing documents. 2 weeks into her stay, an unexpected opportunity arose when Vincent received a letter that visibly disturbed him. "Bad news?" Hannah inquired, looking up from the inventory list she was organizing. Vincent frowned at the paper in his hands. "The cattle buyers from Chicago are arriving next week instead of next month. I need to prepare contracts, organize a proper demonstration of the herd." "I can help with the contracts," Hannah offered. "It's not just that," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "These men expect to be entertained. In the past, I've taken them to the saloon in Stockton, but that hardly seems appropriate for serious business negotiations," Hannah finished. "Why not host them here? Mrs. Coleman and I could prepare a proper dinner." Vincent looked uncertain. "These are sophisticated businessmen from a big city. They're used to a certain level of refinement, which I can provide, Hannah said confidently. I've attended and organized countless formal dinners in Boston. Let me handle this. After a moment's consideration, Vincent nodded. All right. But I'll need to ride into town for supplies. I'll come with you, Hannah said promptly. I haven't seen Stockton properly yet. The next day found them in the wagon heading toward town. Hannah had resumed wearing her proper dresses for the occasion and couldn't help but notice how Vincent's gaze occasionally drifted to her profile. You look. He began, then seemed to think better of it. Yes, Hannah prompted. Different, he finished lamely. From your riding clothes, I mean. Hannah smiled. I should hope so. Stockton proved to be larger than Hannah had initially thought, a bustling frontier town with a main street lined with businesses. From the expected saloons and general store to more surprising establishments like a milliner's shop and a small bookstore. Vincent helped her down from the wagon, his hand warm against hers. We need to visit the general store first for supplies. Then I thought you might want to see the bookstore. It's small, but you have a bookstore, Hannah interrupted, eyes bright with excitement. The corner of Vincent's mouth lifted. Told you Stockton wasn't completely uncivilized. As they walked down the boardwalk, Hannah was acutely aware of curious glances from townspeople. A few men nodded respectfully to Vincent, their eyes lingering questioningly on Hannah. Word travels fast in small towns, Vincent explained quietly. Everyone knows I sent for a bride. And now they're wondering why I'm still here but not wearing a wedding ring, Hannah deduced. Vincent's expression tightened. Does it bother you? Gossip is the same everywhere, Hannah replied philosophically. Boston drawing rooms or Montana streets. Their first stop was Henderson's General Store, where Vincent introduced Hannah to the proprietor, a jovial man with enormous mustaches. Miss Adams. The whole town's been curious about you, Mr. Henderson said, pumping her hand enthusiastically. Mrs. Henderson will be delighted to meet another educated lady. She runs the literary society, all 3 members. Hannah smiled warmly. I'd be honored to meet her. While Vincent discussed orders with Mr. Henderson, Hannah explored the store's offerings, making notes about items they'd need for the upcoming dinner. She was examining candle options when she became aware of voices from the next aisle. Awfully high and mighty for a mail-order bride who got rejected, a woman's voice said, pitched low but clearly audible. I heard he took one look at her fancy Boston ways and changed his mind, another replied, keeping her on as some kind of servant instead. If she's smart, as they say, she'll set her sights elsewhere. Yates always was a stubborn fool, thinking books and breeding cattle don't mix. Hannah froze, heat rushing to her face. The women continued their speculation, unaware of her presence just feet away. Miss Adams. Vincent's voice broke through her mortification as he appeared at the end of the aisle. His expression changed immediately as he took in her flushed face. What happened? Nothing, Hannah said quickly, not wanting him to know she'd been the subject of gossip. Just a bit warm in here. His eyes narrowed, scanning the store. The sudden silence from the next aisle suggested the gossiping women had recognized his voice. I believe we're done here, Vincent said loudly. Mr. Henderson will deliver our order tomorrow. He offered Hannah his arm, which she took gratefully. Outside, he led her toward a small building with a painted sign reading Stockton Book Emporium. You heard them, he said, not a question. Hannah sighed. Small towns are the same everywhere, too. Vincent's jaw tightened. I'm sorry, people should mind their own business. It's fine, Hannah assured him, though the words had stung more than she wanted to admit. They're just curious. He stopped walking, turning to face her. It's not fine, and it's my fault for not being clear about your position. My position? Hannah echoed, suddenly uncertain. Vincent looked uncomfortable. I mean our arrangement, the month's trial. Ah, Hannah said, trying to ignore the twinge of disappointment. Of course. The moment was broken by the appearance of a slender woman in her 30s emerging from the bookstore, Vincent Yates. I thought I saw you through the window, she exclaimed, her smile bright. And this must be Miss Adams. I'm Eliza Parker, the owner of this humble establishment. Hannah gratefully turned her attention to the newcomer, accepting her outstretched hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Parker. I was so surprised to find a bookstore in Stockton. Oh, please call me Eliza, the woman insisted. And you must come in. I just received a shipment from San Francisco last week. The bookstore was indeed small but well organized, with shelves lining every available wall. The scent of paper and leather bindings made Hannah feel instantly at home. Mr. Henderson mentioned a literary society. Hannah inquired as she browsed the shelves. Eliza laughed. A grand name for three women who enjoy discussing books over tea. We'd love to have you join us. Vincent, who had been examining a shelf of agricultural texts, looked up with an unreadable expression. That's very kind, Hannah said, but I'm not certain how long I'll be staying in Stockton. A flash of what might have been disappointment crossed Vincent's face before he returned to his book. The rest of their visit passed pleasantly, with Hannah selecting several volumes she thought might interest Vincent, including a collection of Mark Twain's writings and a practical manual on crop rotation. As they prepared to leave town, Vincent surprised her by stopping at the small restaurant on the main street. I thought you might enjoy a meal you didn't have to help prepare, he explained, looking almost shy. The restaurant was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and windows overlooking the street. As they ate, Vincent gradually relaxed, telling Hannah stories about Stockton's early days and the characters who populated it. The town's changed a lot in 10 years, he reflected, watching people pass by the window. When I first arrived, it was little more than a trading post. Now there's talk of the railroad coming through. You welcome the changes? Hannah asked. Vincent considered this. Some. Better access to markets would help the ranch, but I don't want Stockton to lose its character. Progress doesn't have to mean losing what matters, Hannah observed. He studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. Is that why you came west? Looking for progress while keeping what matters? The question struck Hannah as unexpectedly perceptive. Perhaps. Boston had become a place of memories rather than possibilities. I wanted to build something new without forgetting what shaped me. Vincent nodded slowly. I understand that better than you might think. Their eyes held across the table, and Hannah felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the excellent apple pie they were sharing for dessert. There was a depth to Vincent Yates that she was only beginning to fathom, layers hidden beneath his reserved exterior. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought. As they approached the homestead in the gathering dusk, Hannah found herself reluctant for the day to end. Thank you for taking me to town, she said as Vincent helped her down from the wagon. I enjoyed seeing where you built your life. His hands lingered at her waist. Thank you for coming. It was nice to see Stockton through fresh eyes. For a moment, Hannah thought he might say more, might finally breach the careful distance he maintained. Instead, he stepped back and cleared his throat. We should prepare for those buyers, he said, his tone shifting to business. They'll be here in 4 days. Hannah nodded, hiding her disappointment. I'll speak with Mrs. Coleman tomorrow about the menu. As she watched him lead the horses toward the barn, Hannah acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. She was developing feelings for Vincent Yates, feelings that complicated their pragmatic arrangement considerably. And in less than 2 weeks, the month's trial would end, forcing a decision neither of them might be ready to make. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparations. Hannah threw herself into organizing a dinner that would impress the Chicago businessmen, working with Mrs. Coleman to plan a menu that showcased local ingredients while meeting Eastern expectations. These city men expect to be served beans and hardtack, Mrs. Coleman snorted as she and Hannah planned the meal. We'll show them Montana hospitality is more than that. Hannah smiled at the we, a sign of how far she and the housekeeper had come. I was thinking roast venison if Vincent can procure some, with those wild mushrooms you showed me and perhaps a berry cobbler for dessert. Ambitious, Mrs. Coleman nodded approvingly, but doable. The dining room needs attention though hasn't been used for a proper dinner since Vincent's father was alive. Together, they tackled the formal dining room, unearthing a set of surprisingly fine china and silver that had been packed away for years. Hannah polished each piece while Mrs. Coleman shared stories of the elder Mr. Yates. He had grand visions for this place, the housekeeper recalled. Wanted it to be the social center of the county. After he passed, Vincent focused on making the ranch profitable, never much cared for entertaining. He seems more practical than his father, Hannah observed, carefully wiping tarnish from a silver fork. Different, not better or worse, Mrs. Coleman corrected. The father had vision, the son has determination, takes both to build something lasting. Hannah considered this wisdom as she worked, wondering how much of Vincent's reserve stemmed from the burden of fulfilling his father's dreams while forging his own path. Vincent himself was increasingly absent as the buyer's visit approached, rising before dawn and returning after sunset, his focus entirely on presenting his herd in the best possible light. The evening reading sessions had been temporarily abandoned, and Hannah found herself missing their quiet companionship. The morning of the businessmen's arrival dawned clear and mild. Hannah had just finished arranging wildflowers in the center of the dining table when she heard the sound of approaching horses. She smoothed her best dress, a deep green silk she'd brought from Boston, and went to join Vincent on the porch. He was waiting nervously, dressed in what was clearly his finest clothing, a well-cut black suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to distinguished businessman. The sight of him so formally attired made Hannah's breath catch. "You look," she began. "Uncomfortable," Vincent finished with a wry smile. "But presentable." "Very," Hannah assured him, adjusting his slightly crooked tie. The simple gesture felt unexpectedly intimate, and Vincent's eyes darkened as he looked down at her. The moment was broken by the arrival of 3 well-dressed men on horseback, led by a 4th man Hannah recognized as the local banker from their visit to Stockton. "Showtime," Vincent murmured, straightening his shoulders. The introductions passed in a blur. Mr. Brooks, the senior buyer, Mr. Calloway, his associate, and Mr. Donnelly, their secretary. The banker, Mr. Peterson, hovered at the edges, clearly hoping to facilitate a deal that would benefit the town's economy. "Miss Adams is my—" Vincent hesitated fractionally. "Associate. She manages the ranch's accounts and correspondence." Hannah noted the curious glances exchanged by the visitors, but maintained a professional smile as she welcomed them inside. The afternoon was devoted to business. The men rode out to inspect the cattle, while Hannah finalized dinner preparations with Mrs. Coleman. By the time they returned, the dining room was transformed, table gleaming with polished silver, candles lit, and the aroma of roasting venison filling the air. "Gentlemen, dinner is served," Hannah announced, gesturing toward the dining room. The Chicago men's surprise at the elegant setting was evident in their raised eyebrows and appreciative murmurs. Vincent caught Hannah's eye across the room, a mix of gratitude and admiration in his gaze that warmed her more than the businessman's approval. Dinner proved to be a success, beyond Hannah's hopes. The food was excellent, the conversation flowing easily as she deftly navigated topics from Chicago society to Western expansion. Vincent, initially quiet, gradually joined the discussion when it turned to breeding techniques and market projections. "Your operation is impressive, Yates," Brooks said as they enjoyed Mrs. Coleman's berry cobbler. "More sophisticated than we expected to find out here." "Thank you," Vincent replied. "I've been implementing new methods." "And your associate," Brooks continued, glancing at Hannah, "brings an unexpected refinement to the proceedings. A fortunate arrangement." Hannah felt Vincent tense beside her. "Miss Adams has been invaluable to the ranch's development," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Indeed," Brooks smiled thinly. "Well, I believe we've seen enough to make a decision. We're prepared to contract for 100 head now, with an option for 200 more in the spring at the price we discussed." Vincent's eyes widened slightly. It was, Hannah knew, a larger order than he'd anticipated. "That's acceptable," he said, his composure admirable. "Miss Adams can draw up the contracts tomorrow morning." "Excellent," Brooks nodded. A toast, then, to successful partnerships. As glasses were raised, Hannah felt Vincent's hand find hers beneath the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. The gesture was small but significant acknowledgement that they had accomplished this together. After dinner, the men retired to the porch with cigars while Hannah supervised the clearing of the table. When she joined them later, she found Vincent and Brooks deep in conversation about expanding markets while the others listened attentively. "Miss Adams," Brooks said as she approached, "I was just telling Yates that with proper management, his operation could become one of the largest suppliers to the Chicago market." "Mr. Yates has the vision and capacity for such expansion," Hannah agreed. "His breeding program is particularly forward-thinking." Brooks studied her with newfound interest. "You understand the cattle business, then?" "I understand business principles," Hannah replied. "The specifics of cattle ranching I'm still learning, but the fundamentals of sound investment and strategic growth apply everywhere." "Interesting perspective," Brooks nodded. "Few women concern themselves with such matters." "Few women are given the opportunity," Hannah countered pleasantly. "But when they are, the results can be remarkable." Vincent was watching her with an expression Hannah couldn't quite decipher, pride, perhaps, mixed with something deeper that made her heart beat faster. The evening concluded with handshakes and promises of contracts to be signed in the morning. As the visitors retired to the guest rooms Mrs. Coleman had prepared, Vincent lingered on the porch with Hannah, looking out at the star-strewn Montana sky. "That was," he began. "Successful," Hannah supplied. "Extraordinary," Vincent corrected. "You were extraordinary. The way you handled Brooks, the dinner, everything." Hannah felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "We did it together. Your knowledge of the herd impressed them as much as the venison." Vincent turned to face her, his expression serious. "I owe you an apology, Hannah." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her. "For what?" she asked softly. "For judging you before I knew you. For assuming your education made you unsuitable for this life." His eyes held hers in the moonlight. "I was wrong." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Does this mean?" "It means I've been a fool," Vincent said quietly, "and I'd like to start again if you're willing." Before Hannah could respond, the door opened behind them and Mr. Peterson stepped onto the porch. "Ah, there you are," the banker said. "Brooks wanted me to confirm the details of tomorrow's signing. He mentioned continuing on to the Jenkins Ranch afterwards. Seems they're looking to diversify their suppliers." The spell broken, Vincent stepped back and nodded. "Of course. Let's discuss the particulars inside." He cast an apologetic glance at Hannah before following Peterson inside, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts and the vast Montana night. Morning brought a flurry of activity as Hannah prepared the contracts while Vincent and Mrs. Coleman served breakfast to their guests. The dining room hummed with conversation as the businessmen discussed their itinerary, and Peterson offered suggestions for their journey to the Jenkins Ranch. Hannah was just finishing the final document when Vincent appeared in the doorway of his office. "Everything ready," she nodded, gathering the papers. "All prepared. I've included the terms for future purchases as discussed." Vincent hesitated, then closed the door behind him. "About last night. We can talk later," Hannah said quickly. "They're waiting." "No," Vincent said firmly. "This is important. Last night I began to say something and we were interrupted. I need to finish." Hannah's heart pounded as Vincent moved closer. "I'm listening." "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I thought I knew exactly what I needed: a practical, obedient woman who would fit neatly into the life I'd planned." His voice was low, intimate. "I never expected someone like you, Hannah. Someone who would challenge me, improve me, make me see possibilities I'd never considered." Hannah swallowed hard. "And now I'm asking if you would consider staying," Vincent said, his blue eyes searching hers. "Not as my employee or temporary associate, but as my wife. As my partner in everything." Before Hannah could respond, a knock at the door made them both jump. "Contracts ready," Brooks called from the other side. Vincent's jaw tightened in frustration. "We'll be right there," he called back, then turned to Hannah with a look of such vulnerable hope that it nearly undid her. "Will you think about it, please?" "I will," Hannah promised, her voice barely above a whisper. The contract signing proceeded smoothly, with Hannah explaining the terms and Vincent negotiating final details. Throughout the proceedings, Hannah was acutely aware of Vincent's gaze returning to her whenever Brooks or the others were occupied. By mid-morning, the businessmen were preparing to depart for the Jenkins Ranch. As farewells were exchanged on the porch, Brooks took Hannah aside. "Miss Adams, I hope you don't mind my saying so, but you seem wasted out here," he said quietly. "Our company is expanding its operations. We could use someone with your head for business and refinement. Should you ever find yourself seeking new opportunities, there would be a place for you in Chicago." Hannah was taken aback by the unexpected offer. "That's very kind, Mr. Brooks. Not kindness, good business sense," he replied. "Think about it. Civilization has much more to offer a woman of your capabilities." As the visitors departed in a cloud of dust, Hannah stood beside Vincent on the porch, Brooks's offer echoing in her mind alongside Vincent's proposal. Two paths stretching before her: the sophisticated eastern city or the rugged western frontier. The choice seemed to embody everything she'd been wrestling with since arriving in Montana. Mrs. Coleman bustled past them carrying linens. "I'll get the guest room sorted, then start on lunch. Unless you two have something to discuss." She gave them a pointed look before disappearing inside. Vincent smiled faintly, subtle as always. He turned to Hannah, his expression growing serious. "Walk with me." They strolled in silence toward a grove of pines that provided shade near the house. The morning was warming rapidly, the scent of sun-baked grass rising around them. "Brooks offered me a position in Chicago," Hannah said when they reached the trees. Vincent stopped walking. "I see. He said civilization has more to offer a woman like me," she continued, watching his face carefully. A muscle ticked in Vincent's jaw. "Does it?" Hannah considered the question seriously. 6 weeks ago I would have said yes without hesitation. Now I'm not so certain." "What's changed?" Vincent asked quietly. "I've changed," Hannah admitted. Or perhaps I've simply discovered parts of myself I didn't know existed. I came west believing I was making a sacrifice, trading refinement for security. I never expected to find fulfillment here. Hope flickered in Vincent's eyes. And have you found fulfillment? Hannah took a deep breath. I've found possibility, I've found purpose, and I've found a man who was willing to learn from me even when it challenged everything he thought he wanted. Vincent moved closer, his voice low and urgent. I meant what I said earlier, Hannah. I want you to stay. Not as the wife I thought I needed, but as the partner I never knew to hope for. Are you certain? Hannah asked, needing to be sure. You rejected me because of my education. What's changed? Everything, Vincent said simply. I rejected a stranger whose education I feared would make her unhappy here. Now I know a woman whose mind enriches everything she touches, including me. He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. I was afraid you wouldn't fit into my world. I never considered that together, we might create something better than either of us could alone. Hannah's heart swelled at his words. I wasn't entirely honest when I arrived, she confessed. I told you I came west for a new beginning, but I didn't tell you how desperate I was for belonging. My education set me apart in Boston, too unconventional for proper society, too privileged to truly understand struggle. I've never quite fit anywhere. Until now, Vincent asked softly. Until you, Hannah corrected, reaching up to touch his face. You've given me space to be both the woman Boston made me and the woman Montana is shaping me into. Vincent's hands came to rest at her waist, drawing her closer. Is that a yes, Hannah Adams? Will you stay and build this life with me? Yes, Hannah whispered, but on one condition. Vincent's eyebrow rose. Name it. That you never stop letting me teach you, she said with a smile, and that you never stop teaching me. Those are two conditions, Vincent pointed out, his eyes crinkling. I'm already improving your arithmetic, Hannah laughed. Vincent's response was to draw her fully into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised far more than words could express. Hannah melted against him, her arms twining around his neck as the Montana sun warmed their shoulders and the scent of pine surrounded them. When they finally broke apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, Mrs. Coleman will be insufferably smug about this. Hannah laughed breathlessly. She's earned it, I think. There's something else, Vincent said, suddenly serious. If we do this, if we marry, I don't want it to be the arrangement I originally advertised for. I want a true partnership. Your name alongside mine on the ranch records. Your ideas valued equally. Decisions made together. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes at his words. Vincent Yates, for a man who claimed to dislike books, you certainly have a way with words. I had an excellent teacher, he replied, kissing her again, more deeply this time. They returned to the house hand in hand where Mrs. Coleman took one look at their faces and exclaimed, Well, it's about time. I was beginning to think I'd need to lock you two in the root cellar to get any sense knocked into you. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in Stockton's small church with Mrs. Coleman, Danny from the livery, and half the town in attendance. Hannah wore a cream-colored dress ordered specially from Helena, and Vincent stood tall in his black suit, his face transformed by joy as they spoke their vows. Eliza Parker hosted a small reception at the bookstore, where she announced that Hannah would be joining the Literary Society as its 4th member. And Vincent, too, if he wishes, she added with a smile. I might just do that, Vincent replied, surprising everyone but Hannah. My wife has introduced me to the pleasure of good books. I have some catching up to do. As autumn turned to winter, the Yates ranch settled into new rhythms. The evenings grew longer, filled with reading by the fire and planning for spring expansion. Vincent proved an apt pupil not just in literature, but in mathematics and history, devouring the books Hannah ordered from as far away as San Francisco. In turn, Hannah continued learning the practical skills of ranch life, riding out with Vincent whenever weather permitted, developing her own ideas for diversifying their operations with crops that could flourish in Montana's challenging climate. Their first Christmas as a married couple brought a special gift, Hannah's revelation that they would welcome a child in the summer. Vincent's eyes had filled with tears as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our child will have the best of both worlds," he promised. Practical knowledge and book learning, like their parents. "A true partnership," Hannah agreed, covering his hand with hers. Spring came early that year, bringing with it Chicago buyers who found the Yates Ranch, transformed the operation expanded, record-keeping impeccable, and its owners a remarkable team that challenged prevailing notions about educated women and frontier men. Word spread about the unusual couple in Stockton. Other ranchers began consulting Vincent about his innovative breeding techniques, while their wives sought Hannah's advice on everything from accounts to education. By summer, Hannah had established a small school that met 3 afternoons a week, teaching ranch children and several adults, including 2 cowboys who wanted to improve their reading. In July, as wildflowers carpeted the hills and cattle fattened on rich summer grass, Hannah gave birth to a healthy son they named James, after Vincent's father. Mrs. Coleman, now more family than employee, pronounced him the perfect blend of Boston learning and Montana grit. One evening, as autumn approached again, Hannah sat on the porch nursing James while Vincent read aloud from Emerson's essays. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and crimson, the ranch buildings casting long shadows across land that had become truly home. "Listen to this part," Vincent said, his voice warm with appreciation. "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." Hannah smiled, adjusting James against her shoulder. "Appropriate, don't you think? A year ago, we were strangers with misconceptions about each other. Look at us now." Vincent set the book aside and moved to join them on the porch swing. "Best education I ever received," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "learning to look beyond my prejudices to see the woman who would change everything." "We educated each other," Hannah corrected gently, leaning into his embrace as James dozed between them. "And we've only just begun." As darkness settled over the Montana landscape, the lights of the Yates Ranch glowed with welcome, a beacon of what was possible when differences became strengths and barriers became bridges. Inside, books shared shelves with practical tools. Elegant Boston china sat alongside sturdy frontier pottery, and 2 people who had once seemed fundamentally incompatible continued teaching each other the most important lesson of all: that love thrives not in sameness, but in the willingness to learn, to grow, and to build something greater together than either could imagine alone.